Hey, I'm Lurpus. I played Counter-Strike for a living for 8 years. I've been on the desk for some of the biggest events for 5 years. I know nothing about Counter-Strike, but then again, neither does Thorin. Welcome to his YouTube channel.
Astralis are, for my money at least, the most dominant team in history when you add in the context of the era they play in, the version of Counter-Strike, how developed the scene is, how much money, how much resources, how much infrastructure the scene has, the level the game has developed to. For my money, they're the greatest CS:GO team to ever play the game, and as a result, they're also in contention for greatest Counter-Strike lineup to ever play the game. But despite still being seemingly smack in the prime of their era, with a chance to push it out even further and go well above and beyond what anyone else has ever done in the history of this game, NIP, SK Gaming, Fnatic, push them all to one side and do something that absolutely defies belief. Essentially, that can't and won't happen due to what we now know about Astralis' upcoming schedule. So what happened was, it was revealed that as a team, they would be skipping 3 big events already this year. So they've already skipped Star Series Season 7. They got the Na'Vi one over Fnatic. They're going to be skipping DreamHack Masters Dallas and IEM Sydney. IEM Sydney's actually before DreamHack Masters Dallas. And then a lot of people don't know this, but I happen to have inside information they will skip another big event this year. I won't say any information about it, but they will skip at least another. So minimum of 4 big events over the year. Now, that prompted a lot of other discussions, like what that perhaps intimates about behind-the-scenes industry politics, with them being owned by Refresh, who also owns Blast Pro Series, which are tournaments that they've gone to every single one so far, 2 of them this year already. The implications of, like, does it mean that they're prioritizing Blast Pro Series over those other events? What does it mean for the scene that they aren't at those other events, but they're at Blast Pro Series? What does it mean in terms of, is Blast Pro Series even a relevant tournament in that sense? All of that to one side for the moment. I mean, me and Richard in By the Numbers did a pretty comprehensive breakdown of all the potential conflicts of interest, etc. I'll just go from this angle. I actually think Astralis themselves, the 5-man lineup and their coach and the staff at their company, are gambling the legacy that Astralis currently have established and what can come beyond this. Because what they've done up to this point in time is fine. They're the greatest team ever, the best era ever, incredible dominance, contextually unbelievably good as a team. You can barely imagine a better Counter-Strike Global Offensive team. But they still have a chance to go even further, to put 3 more months of dominance, 6 more months of dominance, win another major, more tournaments, keep the era going, not have a dip where for a while it becomes no longer their era and then maybe they get to be dominant later on again, because that won't count as an extended era. That will be like a second era or be some other complications. So the sad part about this topic for me is when you look at it, Astralis are not only going to gamble their legacy, but realistically they're going to lose it because they're not going to be at the tournaments, which would have helped further cement their true greatness and create an even more dominant and longer period of dominance. Because look at them as a team. In 2019, this year, they've currently only played 4 tournaments by my count. They played iBuyPower Masters at the very beginning of the year. They lost that to Team Liquid in the final. They played IEM Katowice, the major. They won that, beating out, obviously Ents in the final of that one. They played Blast Pro Series Sao Paulo not long after the major, and then skipping Star Series, they played Blast Pro Series Miami very recently, which actually they won Blast Pro Series Sao Paulo. They didn't even get out of the group stage element into the final at Blast Pro Series Miami, including a very shocking upset result against MIBR. Now, they have skipped already 1 big event, Star Series Season 7, an event with a very sturdy format. Every match was best of 3. It was a full Swiss system. It went into an 8-team bracket. The finals were played and the playoffs were played in a stadium. You know, this was a big-time event. And in fact, the prize money for Star Series, they had twice as much for first place as a Blast Pro Series event. I think DreamHack Masters up until now has only been 100,000 for first place. So they actually had a lot more prize money than most of the big tournaments in the year. Like, if you won that Star Series, that was better than winning 2 Blast Pro Series in terms of how much money you'd, it'd be equal actually in terms of the overall money. Then you got to look upcoming. They're going to skip IEM Sydney, which starts on the 30th of April. They're going to skip DreamHack Masters Dallas, which starts on the 28th of May. And then, as I said, I happen to know that they're going to skip at least one more big event at the end of the year. Now, the problem here is Star Series Season 7, IEM Sydney, DreamHack Masters Dallas, and this other event. At least 3 of these 4 events are events that if I was looking at the schedule and I was picking, here are the 10 events your team wants to attend, to have the best chance to beat the best competition, to win the most prize money, to get the most ranking points, to be at the most significant events, at least 3 of these 4 would be on this list. So Astralis is already chopping out like 30 to 40% of the most important tournaments over the year, and yet they've already gone to 2 of the Blast Pro Series, and apparently they will attend 5 out of the 7 over the year, which is apparently the way the tournament circuit works for Blast Pro Series, as the HLTV.org interview implied. Now, a side issue here was, well, can you say that they are skipping them due to refresh and to attend Blast Pro Series is really irrelevant, because except for events like last year, where Blast Pro Series Istanbul overlapped with ESL New York, again, an event with more prize money, bigger stature, better teams, Astralis chose to go to Blast Pro Series Istanbul, a tournament in a much worse location, way less prize money, far less significant in terms of the overall tournament, far less significant actually, I haven't checked the prize money on that one, forget that one. I would assume it is though, personally. Less prestigious event to win, less good teams. They chose on that one to prioritize Blast Pro Series. But they're doing that sneaky little trick they like to do, where because they're not all overlapping on the same weekend, they're like, that's not true. We're just skipping that event, but we're not really skipping that event. We're just choosing not to attend. And then it just so happens that on a totally different weekend, we choose to attend the Blast Pro Series. Except that doesn't add up, does it? Because one of the reasons that they gave for why they were skipping events was they said, well, I've got health issues, implying Device with his stomach problems. We've got time zone aspects. We don't like to fly east as much. It wrecks us with jet lag. But remember, in the past, Astralis has already skipped events, and they used to have a really good reason. They would just say, we skip events because we only generally like to play 1 tournament a month, practice support, focus our practice on that, have time off with our family, not get burned out. Now, that's a great excuse, right? That's a great reason to do it. So why not stick with that one? Why bring up health and time? Wait a minute, what's that going to do? Why not stick with the other one? Likewise, the reason why, guys, they don't go back to we're sticking with 1 tournament a month is because then everyone would go, well, then why the fuck are you picking Blast Pro Series as that 1 tournament? Because when you pick that, a tournament that is significantly less competitive in terms of all the top teams attending, they just have some top teams because they only have 6 teams at the tournament. It's way less prestigious to win the event because it's only 1 best of 3 final, the rest are best of 1s. It's way less difficult to win because you only play for a day in the stadium and then you'd play like half a day before that. Like, there's a million factors as to why it doesn't matter as much. So obviously everyone would have the obvious question, why do you only prioritize Blast Pro Series as that 1 tournament a month? Instead, if you go with this other angle of, I've got health issues and time zone, it's a good way to distract people with one hand while you do whatever the fuck you wanted with the other hand, right? So let's ignore that for a second. Because the problem is, by skipping these events, we won't see Astralis on LAN playing a proper style tournament with like proper best of 3s in a playoff bracket until ECS, which they're going to be at, which is obviously starts on the 9th of June. And if they qualify, EPL on the 18th of June. Now, before then, they'll play the group stage aspect, which is on LAN, which is best of 3s, admittedly. But the proper LAN isn't until the 18th of June. And we don't know yet, by the way, if they'll qualify for EPL finals. They very likely will with the very sturdy format EPL has, but they may not. So if they don't, we'll only have ECS. They'll have skipped all these other events. Now, what are the effects of them missing their events? Well, as you can tell by the title of the video, they are going to potentially gamble their legacy. In fact, they are going to gamble their legacy. Even if they win every event they go to except the ones they skip, they're still going to potentially get less points, have less of a chance to push it out there. So let's look at this, okay? So initially, they'll actually win out, and indeed, so will Refresh and Blast Pro Series, because initially, while Astralis is the clear-cut number 1, they're in the middle of their prime and their era, they're incredibly dominant, no one can beat them. I mean, it doesn't really help that much that they lost at Blast Miami, but doesn't that in itself tell you how whack the Blast Pro Series events are if you put them head-to-head with Star Series and DreamHack Masters? Because everyone looks at Blast Miami and goes, well, it was just one of those Blast events and some best of 1s. No, wait, I thought it was a massive tournament, a really important one to attend each year. Oh, that's right, when they lose, we all see that it doesn't really mean much. Well, guess what that implies when they win? Also doesn't really mean much. So as they're going and skipping those other events, first of all, yes, it helps Blast events because they're the only place you can see Astralis at the moment. And it also hurts events like Star Series because people look at that event and go, but if Team Liquid had been there, some of these other teams wouldn't have had a top 4 finish. If Astralis had been there, would Na'Vi have won the event? I don't think they would have done. Well, it's all well and good to say that initially, but I can tell you that will actually reverse as a trend. Because what will happen is, in time, it will go the other way, and it will be Astralis who's missing out because they're not at the event, and the teams who are at the event, it'll just be a given that, well, it's not Blast, and it's not ECS or EPL, therefore, no, there is no Astralis. Forget about them. Out of sight, out of mind. We look at the teams who are there, they start to win championships. They start to win ranking points. It won't matter that everyone goes, but Astralis wasn't there. Yeah, that's their choice. They need to man the fuck up. This team's playing all the tournaments. FaZe, Clan, Renegades, Ents. Where is Astralis? It'd be easy to actually call Astralis out. If I'm a team who wins all those events, I'd go on record and call Astralis out. Shame that they won't be attending the next one, but we'll be happy to take that trophy and come close to that number 1 spot. So in the past, there have been top teams who skipped occasional events. So actually, I'll give you an example. Fnatic, right in their prime, actually chose to skip Star Series and Gfinity early in 2015. Instead, they went to ESEA and then they waited a while until PGL CCS. And for a brief period, that made those events not as sick. But it was only 1 or 2 tournaments is the point. It wasn't loads of tournaments. So think about this. They're going to skip that many, like potentially a fourth, 30% of the circuit of really important tournaments over a year. Now it actually becomes that it's them who's missing out by doing that. Their era gets less dominant. They just outright won't accept chances to battle the best teams, and therefore they won't be thought of as such a great team. I mean, remember that whole stat that they always had going for them that I've always brought up, because to me, this is the most incredible stat. Not the number of best of 3s they've won, or their record on Nuke or Inferno, or winning back-to-back majors. I actually think the most impressive stat for Astralis is that as a team, they didn't skip many events last year. They went to mainly all the big events. And yet, at the end of the year, from the period they became, by most people, the consensus number 1, when they won DreamHack Masters Marseille, from that point until now, they have never lost 2 tournaments in a row. So even when they lost at IEM Sydney, they came right back and they won, I think it was EPL after that. Even when they lost at DreamHack ESL Cologne, they came back right afterwards and won a big event. Even when they lost at DreamHack Masters Stockholm, they won the major right afterwards. Even when they lost at Blast Pro Series, I think, was it Copenhagen? No, it couldn't have been Copenhagen. It must be the other one. I think it was Copenhagen, right? That was the one they didn't win at. Then they had to go and win the next big event, whatever that would have been. EPL or IEM Chicago, I would assume at that point in time. That stat was a really crazy stat. You couldn't go 2 tournaments and put these guys away from a trophy. Well, it means a lot less now when you skip 3 or 4 of the big events of the top 10 events of the year. That means almost fuck all as a stat. It's like, they didn't lose 2 tournaments in a row because they just skipped the next 2 tournaments, so they didn't go to that next big tournament where the other teams who could have then got revenge on them indeed did go. And then they waited and they played either a Blast Pro Series or some other event, and then they won, but it was a month and a half later. So that stat's a lot less cool now, right, Thorin? Then add in, because now there's going to be less opportunities for teams to play against them and to study examples of them playing, it now gets less crazy that they do dominate every event. It was crazy that they could go from event to event to event and win so many of them and place highly. And even like a bad tournament for Astralis was like making the final. Literally, the worst tournaments pretty much were making top 4. Other than that, they were making the final even if they lost. Well, now you're not even going to be at that tournament to come in the final or semi-finals, even if you don't win it. Then there's the fact that they are going to still attend some more Blast Pro Series events, which also makes them and Blast Pro Series look like a joke. Because if Blast Pro Series is just a fun event on the side, I'm down with it. I see a lot of business sense in it. I think it is kind of fun. It also brings different aspect to all the different regions that they're going to visit. It has its own different format that can be a kind of a respite from the super intense format we have. But if you're going to put them directly in place of bigger tournaments with better prize money and more prestige and better formats, or say that I'm going to attend this instead of it, then I'm going to call that out. That is bullshit. You're attending some dummy-ass little exhibition tournament that at the moment is a closed system. In theory, you invite other teams, but they can't qualify for the grand finals, and then you're going to have shitty local teams play bum-ass qualifiers that no one wants to fucking see, and then some of the teams are getting invited like Cloud9 just off fucking name value and ability to put bums in seats. They're not even vaguely as competitive as a Renegades or an Ents right now, but they're getting invited over them because of this stupid-ass aspect. So if that's a side thing, no problem. A lot of those issues go away way. If we're going to have the number one team in the world make this a focal point and skip other events, they're going to gamble their legacy, and what they're going to give to this event is going to help that company in the short term, but it ain't going to help this team's legacy in the long term. And that's the key point. Because when Astralis doesn't attend these events, they get 0 ranking points from those events. Well, that's pretty big, because they're such a good team and they're so hard to beat that at the moment, if they go to an event, they're guaranteed to get a pretty good amount of ranking points, because they come minimum top 4, they make the finals, they win a whole bunch of them. So they're going to literally get 0 points from that. Meanwhile, teams like a Na'Vi, a FaZe, whoever it might be, if they attend the event and even finish top 8, they're closing the distance on Astralis. Then you got to look at the fact that if the era of Astralis does continue and they don't get displaced from number 1, I personally think it's going to end already from not attending these events. They don't have to then lose one of the events like EPL or ECS, and it'll be over. But let's say they win all of those events and somehow maintain their era. It's going to be very tenuous as an era, and more importantly, them having won Blast Pro Series events as part of their era is going to be pretty whack in comparison, like less important tournaments. And you can even then, if you want to be a hater on Astralis, just say, well, teams were invited to these events anyway. Let's say Renegades events become the number 2, 3 teams in the world, and they're not going to a Blast Pro Series. Now it's less relevant. Why did you get invited? Oh, because the company that owns you owns the event and you're the number 1 team. Okay, so that's not as cool to have those be events on your legacy, to be the big ones that you won, right? I already kind of personally mentally chalk out the Blast Pro Series events from last year's Astralis anyway. I don't think that counts that much towards their excellence as it is, hence why no one did lose their mind when they lost the Blast Pro Series Copenhagen or whatever the fuck it was. So when you go and you look at this, not only will they not get any ranking points at all, but someone else who's good is going to start to close the gap. Now, I actually think in this scenario, because Na'Vi also has announced they're going to skip a bunch of the events because they're trying to copy everything Astralis does, I think Na'Vi's going to look even dumber, because there's another team that will be guaranteed getting top 8, top 4, probably winning some of those events. So they're giving up a chance themselves to gain a load of ground and potentially get ahead of Astralis by the time the next major comes. Then you got to add in every other legacy in the history of CSGO ended out of the choice of the opponent, not the team in question. The team in question wanted to keep that era going, wanted to be number 1 still, but they couldn't win enough anymore, or they were beaten too many times, or finally people overcame them convincingly, or they just dropped off as a team, and that was the end of their era. But they could go to sleep every night knowing we gave everything to that era, and that's just how long it ended up lasting. Was it a short one like SK? Was it a really long one like NIP? Was it a really cool one like Fnatic? Who knows what it was? But at the end of the day, they can say, we just couldn't keep the era going. If Astralis ends by just bleeding off ranking points by not attending events, other teams winning events that they're not at, and so everyone initially says, well, if Astralis was there, they'd beat you, but eventually people start going, why aren't Astralis there? Because now they can't even get any of these trophies. It'll actually just end with a whimper, and it'll end in a manner where they'll go to sleep actually years from now thinking, how long could we have extended that era? Could we have gone 3 majors in a row? Could we have won most of the DreamHack Masters and most of the big ESL events and won the Grand Slam for a second time? Because even if their era doesn't end, it will become a much more whack era with this dry period and just attending the Blast events and then waiting months and months while other people play big tournaments. It'll actually be Astralis who ends up with an asterisk, because they'll have the best era. In my opinion, they already do. But they'll have an even better era if they win all those events. It's just it'll have an asterisk like, yeah, but for the last few months they did skip a lot of the big tournaments. They dodged kind of their big opponents and they only played these small exhibition tournaments and then some other ones later which they managed to qualify for. Then you got to just throw in the whole Intel Grand Slam thing. Last year, they did skip a couple of events. They skipped the ESL Belo Horizonte, which FaZe won. They skipped ESL New York, which Mousespots ended up winning. But they managed to win the Grand Slam anyway because they went to so many big events. Now, if they're already going to skip a number, at least by my count, a minimum of 2 of the Intel events, and who knows if one of these other events is an Intel event or not, I won't say. This is going to potentially impact whether they win the Intel Grand Slam another year. And so when you consider, not only is it prestigious, but it would be another great way to put another exclamation point on an insane era, going back-to-back Grand Slams, and add in that you get $1 million extra. That's why people are making accusations that Refresh are in any way behind the move. Whether Astralis are the ones who signed off on it, or chose it, or recommended it, or whatever, the fact that it happens to coincidentally benefit Refresh the company is ridiculous, because it takes away some of the status from the Intel Grand Slam and whoever wins that, and also it means that this team's showing they're willing to potentially give up $1 million to go to these Blast events and not to travel to as many of the big events. Like, you know, I've got a lot of compassion for them on the angle of like one of your best players is really injured and he has a lot of conditions as to how he can travel. Sure. And that already might sap what's in your era, but you're not helping it by doing this scenario, are you? So you know what? It's up to Astralis what they do. But I think it sucks for Counter-Strike. It's going to make the scene way less interesting. And quite frankly, it is going to blow their chance to make an even better era, the craziest era we've ever seen, the strongest era we've ever seen. And they are literally gambling their legacies in ways where some of these bets they have to lose. Because they're betting that not attending an event is fine, somehow for their legacy, for their status, just because it gives someone resting time. So you're resting, but you know what? You know that old saying, I'll rest when I'm dead. That's the point of what you want to do when you're on top. You want to rest later when things start to go badly. You don't want to rest now when you're in your absolute top. And this is where you're supposed to push the pedal to the metal, as they all say. This is a nightmare if you're a Counter-Strike or an Astralis fan. This video was generously supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Butt Pounder 420, JDubs, Chi Mao, Daniel Olivar, Jiangheng Lu, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Now, do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my work? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my monthly AMA. Do you want teasers for who the guests are on my upcoming content? Maybe you want to take part in a monthly esports discussion with yours truly. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.